Hello everyone, welcome to Election Future. In this video, I'm going to give you my bold and updated 2024 electoral map prediction. J.D. Vance defeated Tim Walz in the first and only vice presidential debate. Democrats have a lot of work to do as Kamala Harris continues to fall behind in the polls, with Trump surging in swing states. Walz did not accomplish what he needed to, leaving both him and the vice president in a precarious position as we enter the final month of the campaign. In this video, I'll update my 2024 electoral map to show how the math has changed for both Harris and Trump following the debate. We'll begin by filling in the solid states for both candidates. These are states where either Harris or Trump is expected to win by 15 percentage points or more. The vice president is likely to carry Washington, California, Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine, giving her just 109 electoral votes. On the other hand, Trump is projected to win Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska, except for the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, Alaska, the 2nd District of Maine, and Iowa, a state he won in both 2016 and 2020 by nearly double digits. With the safe states filled in for both candidates, Donald Trump takes an early lead with 132 electoral votes, while Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are at just 109. Vance's strong performance last night will likely boost the GOP's chances of winning Iowa by the largest margin since the 1980s. Now for the likely states, those where either candidate is expected to win by 7 to 15 points. These races will be more competitive, but one candidate will maintain a clear edge. Starting with the likely blue states, we have Oregon and Illinois, both of which went to Joe Biden by solid margins in 2020. He won Oregon by 16 points and Illinois by 17. Harris isn't expected to perform as well as the current president. In the Northeast, we also have New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Democrats have been struggling in New York and New Jersey. In New York, for instance, the party has been plagued by scandals. In 2022, Andrew Cuomo resigned as governor, and his successor, Kathy Hochul, hasn't been much more popular. Her first lieutenant governor resigned due to scandal, and recently, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a Democrat, was indicted on corruption charges. These events have significantly hurt Democratic support in New York. Bob Menendez's legal troubles in New Jersey aren't helping either. As a result, these traditionally blue states, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware, will be more competitive than they were 4 years ago. Biden won all three by 15 percentage points or more in 2020. Finally, we have Colorado, a state that Biden won by nearly 14 points in the last election. I'll give Harris the benefit of the doubt and predict she'll win Colorado by just over 7 points, making it a likely blue state. While Colorado remains relatively liberal, it will be difficult for Trump to make significant inroads there, though he will likely do better than in 2020. Now, on to the likely red states, where Trump is expected to win by at least 7 percentage points. We'll start with Ohio, a state Trump won in both 2016 and 2020. He flipped it in 2016 after it went to Obama by 3 points in 2012. In 2020, polls predicted a close race in Ohio, with Trump winning by just 1%, but he ended up carrying the state by 8 points. This time, he's likely to win Ohio by double digits. Ohio is clearly a likely red state. Next is Texas, another state that was thought to be competitive in 2020, despite not going blue since 1976. Some believed Joe Biden could pull off a victory in Texas, but Trump ultimately won by 6 points, although his margin was narrower than in 2016 when he won by 9 points. Against Harris, Trump is on track to win Texas by 10 percentage points or more in November. Before we continue, nearly 80% of you watching aren't subscribed, so please take a moment to subscribe for more content like this leading up to the election in November. Also, join my Discord server to chat with me personally. The link is in the description below. Lastly, let's look at Florida, a state that was one of the most competitive in the country 4 years ago. Polls had Joe Biden winning Florida by 2 to 3 points, but he ended up losing by a similar margin, which was a significant surprise. Biden performed worse in Florida than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. Now, Florida is no longer in play. It's not a battleground, nor is it a swing state. Trump is expected to win by 7 to 10 points. In 2022, Governor Ron DeSantis was re-elected by a 20-point margin, so while the presidential race will be more competitive, there's little doubt Republicans will carry Florida for the 3rd time in a row with Trump leading the ticket. With the solid and likely states filled in for both candidates, Trump continues to lead with 219 electoral votes to Harris's 191. Trump is now just 51 electoral votes away from securing the presidency. We're left with 12 states, which will be categorized as lean or tilt states, the most competitive on the map. They're worth 128 electoral votes, less than a quarter of the Electoral College, but they truly wield all the power. It's in these states where the election is won or lost, especially key states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia. We'll start with the lean blue states for Harris, states she is expected to win by 2 to 7 points. Beginning in the Northeast, we have New Hampshire and Maine. She'll likely win these states by a margin somewhere between Clinton's and Biden's from 4 and 8 years ago. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won New Hampshire by 0.37% and Maine by 2.9%. Joe Biden did a little better, winning New Hampshire by 7.4% and Maine by 9.1%. Kamala Harris is expected to win both of these states by around 4 to 6 points. While she's favored to win, these won't be impressive victories. Moving on to New Mexico, this is a state that Democrats haven't lost since 2004. Joe Biden won it by a double-digit margin in 2020, but Democrats likely won't perform much better in New Mexico in the coming decades. They may even lose it within 20 years as the Hispanic vote continues to shift toward the right. New Mexico is the only state in the country with a majority Hispanic electorate, and this group is increasingly favoring Trump and the GOP. This is why I categorize it as a lean blue state. Believe it or not, Kamala Harris is performing much worse with minority voters than Biden did in 2020. On par with Hillary Clinton's 2016 performance with minorities, which is a troubling sign for Democrats since minority voters make up a large part of their coalition. New Mexico being lean blue is a bad sign for Harris, given that Biden carried it by 11 points in the last election. Now, for the lean Trump states, there are quite a few, many of them in the Sun Belt. Let's start with Arizona, which has quickly become the most conservative of the 8 swing states. I also consider Virginia a toss-up, and we might start to include Minnesota as well. Out of all the remaining states, Arizona is likely to go to Trump by the largest margin. He's dominated every poll conducted in the state, leading in all 10 of the last 10 polls. According to betting markets, Trump has better odds in Arizona than in both North Carolina and Georgia. Though Biden won Arizona in the last election, Harris is on track to lose it this time around. Arizona is a lean red state, with Trump likely to win by about 3 to 4 points. Moving east, we have North Carolina, the only swing state that went to Trump in both 2016 and 2020. He won by 4 points in 2016 and by just over 1% in 2020, which came as a pleasant surprise for Republicans because polls suggested they'd lose the Tar Heel state. However, Trump pulled off a victory, and now he's on track to win North Carolina for the 3rd time in a row. He's dominating the polls there, just like in Arizona. Although Mark Robinson isn't expected to help Trump much, he may even drag him down a bit. Still, Trump has done well in North Carolina in both elections he's contested, and he's likely to do so again. I expect him to win by about 3 percentage points. Next up is Georgia, the most competitive state in 2020, where the election was decided by the smallest margin. Just 0.24% separated the incumbent president and the former president. This time, there's little doubt that Trump is on track to win Georgia back. Biden's victory in 2020 was the first for any Democrat since 1992, but Harris isn't likely to replicate that. She simply isn't performing as well as Biden did in the last election. In 2016, Trump won Georgia by 5 points, and the state remains fundamentally red, so it's expected to return to the GOP column this time around. What we're seeing is that North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona are becoming more reliable for Trump. He can count on winning all 3 states' electoral votes, which means that from the remaining states, with the exception of Nevada, he only needs to win 1 more to clinch the presidency. That state is most likely Pennsylvania. The Keystone State has been identified by nearly everyone as the most important state for both parties. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, he crosses the 270 electoral vote threshold. Pennsylvania is crucial because while Trump could certainly win states like Wisconsin, Michigan, or Nevada, the math becomes much easier if he carries Pennsylvania. Maybe even Virginia, but if Trump wins these states, he will likely have already won Pennsylvania by a larger margin. In terms of the states necessary for him to win the White House, Pennsylvania is probably the one that will push Trump over 270 electoral votes. He has retaken the lead in the polling averages and is now favored to win back the Keystone State. In 2016, Trump won Pennsylvania by a narrow margin of 0.72%. This was the first time a Republican had won the state in 24 years. Then, in 2020, he lost it to Joe Biden by just over 1%. Today, he is on track to win it back. Pennsylvania will likely flip back to the GOP as Kamala Harris is performing much worse in the polls compared to both Biden and Clinton at this point in 2020 and 2016. The final lean state is Wisconsin. After the disastrous debate performance by Walz, he's hurting Harris in Wisconsin. For a while, many believed that Pennsylvania would vote to the right of Wisconsin, largely because Walz was expected to give Harris a boost in Wisconsin, given that he's the governor of neighboring Minnesota. However, it seems that Walz isn't helping Harris much. Trump is likely to win Wisconsin by a lean margin, just over 2 points. Trump has performed well in Wisconsin in the last 2 election cycles. He won the state by 0.76% in 2016, and when he lost it in 2020, he was expected to lose by 8 points, but he ended up losing by just 0.6%. Polling today shows a tie between Trump and Harris, which is a very positive sign for Trump's campaign. Even when Biden won in 2020, his margin in Wisconsin was smaller than Trump's from 4 years earlier. Now, we're left with 4 states, which will be categorized as tilt states, those that will be decided by less than 2 percentage points. I'll start with the 2nd District of Nebraska, which is going to tilt blue. Moving on to Nevada, this is a state that Trump has a good chance of flipping. It's a state he has never won before, as no Republican has carried Nevada since George W. Bush in 2004. However, Nevada is shifting to the right. In 2016, Hillary Clinton carried Nevada by 2.4%, and Joe Biden won it by the exact same margin in 2020, despite improving his performance in most other states. Nevada was one of only 5 states where Biden did worse than Clinton. In 2022, Republicans won the governorship there, another clear sign that Nevada is trending toward the GOP. This November, Trump has a very good chance of winning the state for the first time in 20 years as a Republican. The final state expected to go to Trump is Michigan. Trump won Michigan in 2016 against Hillary Clinton by just 0.2%. He lost it to Biden by 2.8% in 2020, but this time around he is on track to win it back. Polls severely underestimated Trump's support in Michigan 4 years ago. He was expected to lose the state by 7 points, but ended up losing by less than 3. Today, the polls in Michigan are basically a tie, just like in Wisconsin. When the polls are tied, you can be fairly confident that Trump will come out on top. Michigan will be the final red state on the map, tilting in favor of the former president. That leaves us with Minnesota and Virginia. Virginia has been highly competitive this election cycle. Before Joe Biden dropped out, he was on track to lose the state based on the polling average, and today Harris isn't performing much better. Many polls have her leading by just 3 points, but given that Biden carried Virginia by 10 points in the last election, I still see Harris eking out a narrow victory. In Minnesota, Walz's debate performance isn't helping Harris much. Minnesota is always competitive, and if Walz wasn't the Democratic vice presidential nominee, there's a good chance Trump would be favored in the state. However, Walz is still the governor and will give Harris a boost, though not as much as before the debate. Minnesota, the final state on the map, will tilt blue. It will be just as competitive as it was in 2016 when Hillary Clinton pulled out a 1.5% victory, a much closer race than anyone expected. After the first and probably only Vance-Walz debate, Trump stands at 312 electoral votes, while Harris is at just 226. Trump is gaining ground in Wisconsin, while Minnesota is becoming increasingly competitive. In November will apparently be very exciting. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video and turn on the notification bell. See you in the next video.